Alright, check it out. The newest little endeavor has been drawing up some little eyeballs. Been kind of playing around with this for a little bit. Actually have one from a ways back. Here's some. Got inspired with a kind of commissioned Kobe throw, and we wanted some eyeballs in there. So I was drawing some extras that were a little bit more detailed than the kind of throw-up style. And been back at it now with some other ones. So I'm going to try to go after something like this, maybe even paint it up tomorrow. We'll see where this goes, just practicing a bit, and probably even go after some color on this now rendition. So a little bit bigger on some scratch paper that I can take to the wall with me. Let's see how it goes. So aside from my slight grayscale sketch here, I didn't have much plan going into the kind of color scheme of this. I have kind of a mixed pack of those paint markers I reviewed maybe 6 months ago and figured I'd try to leverage them as best I could. So I went in and tried to do somewhat of an underbase here. So I kind of went ahead and did that orange eye in the center and then started hitting in some of those really dark shadows with the dark kind of brown and gold color. I thought that would be a nice undertone, as well as those were the darkest colors in the set, so figured I was going to probably have to use them as my darks anyways, and then just kind of build up and work from there. I definitely threw in some funky colors that I ended up working back off of the piece. Used some silver in some of the highlights to start, and that looked a little weird. Definitely didn't give the white kind of super highlight I was looking for, but needless to say, kind of covered that up and worked through it. But it was funny to see how cool and interesting the gold actually worked with those dark brown colors. It didn't quite hold up through the whole piece. I ended up kind of masking over top of that as well, but that's definitely something in the future I'll revisit, and even was hoping for having enough kind of yellow and gold spray paint left over from my Game of Thrones mural to do the whole eye on the wall in that kind of color scheme, but that fell short as well. So definitely gonna have to revisit kind of the gold color layout. But altogether, really just kind of built up those undertones and then slowly built up the lighter colors on top. And then, I kind of wanted to almost paint this as if I was going to paint it on the wall, so I knew that would kind of be a logical process for kind of putting in those background colors more or less, and then building up over top of that as I go with the spray paint. So figured I might as well give it a test run here. Had some nice kind of pinky colors come out of using both those pinks and the white combo. Gave kind of a natural eyeball color, and then I was able to get some kind of gray tones in there as well, which was something I definitely didn't expect to have through using kind of like silver combined with the white. I figured it was gonna kind of just turn mostly white, but the combination of the red in there gave it kind of this purpley hue, kind of gave it that natural look. And I don't know if this eye looks like a stone eye or if it kind of just has a natural gray, almost zombie look to it. Needless to say, pretty happy with how the colors all complemented one another, and it gave me some confidence to run at this with the wall, knowing that I had basically some pretty limited color resources to start, and hopefully that the spray paint colors would work in a similar vein as all these paint markers.
We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. Schools stepped us into misery and bloodshed. Radio have brought us closer together. Victims of a system that makes...
Now that was quite the session. Got pretty much the finished piece here. Digging it quite a bit. Nice to use some pretty, accessible paint markers, nothing special with those. Blended them up, got this kind of nice purpley color to the eyeball. Really digging the shadow touch on the page, makes it pop off nicely. Could maybe adjust that hard shadow on the top with the hard highlight on the top. Looks a little funky, but I think it's a good starting point for trying to paint something similar. As you see, I've been trying to do a little bit more detail work and a little more kind of shading oriented stuff to get, you know, that practiced up as a good skill to have. So I'm eager to try this out. Let's see how the painting goes on the wall. Definitely don't have similar colors to that. Got a little mix mash of some other things, so we'll see what kind of color scheme I come up with on the second rendition. So the wall definitely needed to be buffed to start it, and you can actually see a piece there over on the left hand side. That'll be a future video. I was playing with the Turbo 4X from Rusto and had a little bit of trouble, and definitely need to revisit it with some better cap adapters. I was only using the stock tip there, but save that for a later date for sure. You can see kind of in the foreground I've got some pinks and stuff that I'm going to be working with, some kind of skin tones, and I figured those are going to be a good start. Like I said, I didn't have enough of those yellows and oranges to do the whole piece in that, so I figured might as well run it with all the pinks and stuff, as that's pretty close to what I was using on the other half, and kind of just work off that sketch. I have the full kind of colored sketch in hand, and then basically, you know, sketched it out and kind of ended up using some freeform techniques to really build up the piece. I didn't have really any plan going into this. Like I said, I haven't been painting a ton of this realistic style stuff, so I wanted to stick to the essentials that I knew would help me work through this, and that was building up those dark shadows first, building up the shape of it, and then slowly adding on top of the highlights, and almost work from the background out and make sure that, you know, I'm having those deep tones in there and then covering over them just slightly with some of the lighter shades, and that way you can get some of those kind of, you know, variations in value and variations in color. I picked these colors up from a local shop down in Denver that was having a sale after kind of running through most of their iron lac stock, so all these colors were kind of just whatever I could pick up that was similar in tones to what the next color would be. They didn't have a ton of variety to choose from as the last little bit, but super happy with how they all complemented each other. The really godsend here is that deep purple that I had left over from my last mural. That gave some really nice touches in the dark shadowed area, and it worked really great with these light pinks. And really, I kind of just went at some unique techniques here where I was cutting back over top of what I laid down and slowly built up some of these lighter shades and then cut them back with those darker shades. You can see with kind of the veins of the eye, I would paint the really light kind of almost yellow or pink color there, and then cut it back with a slightly lighter shade, and then slowly cut it back with a darker and darker shade. And then also trying to get some 3D with the eye as it went towards the outside of the eyeball. You kind of have a shadow cast on the underneath side of it, so I would make sure to kind of bias and use a little bit more of the purple and the dark pinks down in the right side of the eye, just so it would kind of give a natural shadow and shade to the whole kind of sphere almost, and used a very similar practice all the way around it and slowly almost lightened up that use. So as I went, you know, all the way around from the bottom right up to the top left, I was able to then use some lighter tones on the top and kind of bias those and use those more heavily. So I was using that super light pink to go over top of most. You're not going to see as many veins there. I don't know if this is totally accurate, but you know, this was my approach to it and pretty happy with how it came out. So you have to leave me some feedback if it kind of gives some nice perspective there, and if the shading does kind of work out in my favor. But you know, you can see the undercut of the purple is kind of staying on that bottom right side of all the veins, and that really kept kind of a consistent, you know, shading and style to it.
You are men. Only the unloved hate. The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men. You, the people, have the power. Let us fight to free the world.
Once I made it to the iris, it was a little tighter of a space, and maybe I should have done this first as it was kind of more of the central piece, but I ended up kind of just using the side of my glove as a stencil to work around that piece and slowly, you know, add a slit of light orange, add a slit of orange, add a slit of dark purple, and build that up in a very similar way as all the veins. And that allowed me to kind of get those slits that you do see in the eye with all the coloring and get some kind of smaller details without having to actually be that precise with the cap. You know, I'm definitely learning here, so trying some new skills out. I'm sure plenty of people have used this masking kind of technique before. I ended up pulling off some of the paint here and there while it was wet on the backside of my hand, so more to be learned there, but it was a good kind of easy way to get a tighter hit with the spray paint, even though I was using some, you know, Iron Lac sharpshooter tips, which were pretty skinny to begin with, and this was not a sizable piece, but it definitely didn't feel limited by the caps at all. I ended up fighting a little bit of rain during this painting process, so it wasn't as smooth as I would have liked and kind of got ran out of there by a thunderstorm that was coming in, but altogether super happy with it. I really worked to finish it out with some kind of aggressive highlights. I really wanted to push and see how kind of contrast oriented I could get this to look. You know, it's a really classic way to draw an eyeball is to have these really big highlights on there to show that it's kind of a glistening and, you know, somewhat of a wet surface. And, you know, taking advantage of that, I had that huge light white area on the top left, and then also hit the eye with a couple spots, and then did a little bit of flaring off those to give it somewhat of a lens flare. And I don't know if that's practical or not, but it was just a fun effect that I was playing with. And altogether, you'll have to let me know if you think the kind of eyeball has a nice cell on the wall. I think the 3D spot on the bottom that kind of makes it look like it's levitating is a super nice touch to give it a little bit more depth. Definitely looked pretty flat prior to that. And I actually had to paint a fair bit of the ground around the wall just so that I could have the shadow placed a sizable distance below where the eyeball actually is. So that kind of gave it a nice volume, because if it was going to be right on the flat surface of the wall, it was going to be way too close. So I actually brought that off, and basically looking at it on screen, it sells a lot better than it did in person. It definitely looked all right, but the flatness of your screen and my phone and the camera definitely adds to the kind of perspective that the eyeball is actually able to capture with adding that little drop shadow. So you'll have to let me know if I sold you on the 3D shape and kind of this more realistic style. I had a lot of fun with it. It was definitely something a little different. It was a great size to kind of take this project over and, you know, not feel too intimidated by the fact that I had to fill this huge area. Needless to say, it's probably only 4 feet wide and, you know, 4 or 5 feet tall, so it was definitely an accessible means for a couple hours out there in the afternoon, and I really had fun with it. So be sure to leave your feedback down below, and if you have any questions about the techniques I was trying to use, feel free to leave some comments and I'll try to explain them some more down there. And keep an eye out for the piece you kind of caught off to the side of this. I'll be sure to try to get that out relatively soon after I get some cap adapters and kind of revisit using those cans on the wall. Had fun with them to start, so definitely eager to finish that out, and maybe check out some of the other videos on the channel. I sparingly used some 94 cans in this piece as well, and I recently did a review of those, so if you missed that, maybe check that out and get my review on how crazy those cans actually are. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Peace.